Hi, this is Adrian from International Education Today. I'm going to be talking about concept and design principles in organising a curriculum review. Back in 2013, when I was working as curriculum director at Marymount International School, Paris, I was given the opportunity to present on this theme at the ELSA annual conference. ELSA being the English Language Schools Association of Paris. Now, ELSA represents schools which are English medium in the international sector and bilingual schools in the Paris area, but delegates do attend the conference from across France and beyond. After the presentation, I posted my slides onto SlideShare, and there were about 50,000 engagements over the last few years. With SlideShare about to shut down, I thought it might be wise to share my presentation on the International Education Today website and on my YouTube channel. I'm always happy to engage in discussion and debate with those who view my content, so please get in touch if you have any questions or comments. You can use the comment box on YouTube, or if you prefer, you can go to my website. You can also reach me through email or through Twitter. The first challenge I shared with the delegates at the conference, and it's worth spending some time reflecting upon, is how would you define curriculum? There are different schools of thought. The debate usually focuses on whether curriculum is the total experience that students have in the school, or whether it has the more narrow definition of applying to the content or courses that are offered by a school. I prefer the former definition, and that will influence the tone of my presentation. I believe that curriculum includes academic programs, but also all other learning experiences which takes place within a school. So I'd extend curriculum to include assemblies, school events, extracurricular activities, sporting events, well-being programs, life skills, character development, and any other aspect of school life which impacts upon the students. They are learners in all that they do, so it is, to my mind, important that this is all covered within the wider definition of the term curriculum. Now, to make this really obvious, I'd point to the early years sector. When children are at play, in their free time, this is widely considered to be an important aspect of their learning experience. The teacher and teacher assistants will monitor children at play in order to assess their development, how they socialize with other children, how they communicate, basically how they conduct themselves. And they will give that feedback to their parents. As you will know, if you work in that sector or you've had a child through that sector, it's very common that at the end of the school day, when the parent will collect the child from the school gates, the teacher will be there and give immediate feedback to the parents on the child's development during that day. That, to my mind, is part of sharing the curriculum with parents. When we talk about the curriculum model that a school will adopt, there are many factors that may influence this choice. The first one in some schools will be to meet statutory requirements and the statutory requirements of the host country where the school is based. In the case of many international schools, they are usually exempt from meeting local statutory requirements, but in international education schools and many bilingual schools, it's essential that local guidelines are adhered to. Now, it is possible to adhere to local guidelines and to meet statutory requirements through the medium of English rather than the local language, or through a hybrid of curriculum model which allows a place for both. For example, in my own school in China, which is an international education school, we will teach many of our programs in primary and middle school through the medium of Chinese. But the majority of the programs will be delivered in English. And to some extent, we will deliver content and skills from the Chinese national curriculum through the foreign language. We do this by translating the documents from Chinese into English and then ensuring that we meet the standards which are identified on the Chinese national curriculum. If the content is in any way controversial or relating to history, geography, or scientific discoveries within China, then it will be taught by a Chinese national. But where the content and skills are non-controversial, global geography, world history, which doesn't have such an impact on the Far East, then it's eminently teachable by the foreign national. Beyond the statutory requirements, schools in the international sector will usually frame their curriculum around the English national curriculum. Often this is linked to Cambridge International Programmes or similar, perhaps American standard-based education, or the International Baccalaureate. Other popular models of curriculum which are used within schools may include International Primary Curriculum, Montessori, Steiner, or schools may create their own bespoke bilingual models. The table shows you the top English language curriculum models which are available to schools. The English National Curriculum and the International Baccalaureate being the most popular, but bilingual and US national standards also been very common. I would dispute the term US national curriculum, as I would argue there is no such thing. There are standards-based education. Common Core has statutory recognition in some states, but not all. And that only applies to English and mathematics anyway. So it's not right to say that there is a US national curriculum, to my mind. When developing curriculum, I think it's very wise to look outside the world of education for advice and expertise. And one place I look is to the work of the business writer and speaker Simon Sinek, and particularly his seminal book, Start With Why. Start With Why was written with a focus on the business world, but his ideas are eminently transferable to the world of education. His golden circle is a fantastic model that can be adapted to curriculum design and development, in that it emphasizes that what we expect to teach the students and what they are to learn about and how we are to teach must be led by a consideration of the why. As the graphic shows, the why is at the center. If we don't know why we are doing something and why we want a particular outcome, then to an extent we're fishing in the dark. We should never start with the what. What are we to teach? We should always start with why are we going to teach that? For what purpose? How will this help the young people in their development and as we aspire for them to become lifelong learners? Linking with the golden circle is the idea of the central place of guiding statements in a school's curriculum development and design. A school's guiding statements are the why dimension of any school or group of schools. Guiding statements should be regularly reviewed and revised to reflect the changing landscape of the world of education. They should never be a static document. If guiding statements are just something which is framed and placed on the wall in a school to look nice for visitors, then they have no purpose whatsoever. They should be at the heart of everything we do. They are our essential raison d'etre, our why. When revising and reviewing guiding statements, ideally all stakeholders should play a role in the process. This should include the school's governing body, in some cases the owners, the school leadership, teachers and staff, representatives of the parent community and of the student body, and members of the alumni, if possible. The Council of International Schools, who are highly influential within the international sector, place a great emphasis on the importance of guiding statements. CIS stress that international schools should be mission-driven and vision-led. In order for a school to be accredited by CIS, it is imperative that the guiding statements influence all aspects of school life, i.e., in my definition, the curriculum. A school's guiding statements are a living document that must be at the heart of the school's culture and climate and must drive and lead all aspects of curriculum development. Guiding statements, I will say again, are the why of the international school. There are many different curriculum models which schools may adopt, some of which they may dip into and some which they may adopt in their entirety, depending on the nature and purpose of the school. But whichever program they opt for, it should reflect the guiding statements, the mission and vision of the institution. Now, to make this really obvious, in a British overseas school, it is more than likely that the curriculum model is going to be centred around the English national curriculum. Now, this may include drawing upon Cambridge, but Cambridge has mapped its own curriculum against the English national curriculum. So by using Cambridge programmes, one is essentially delivering the key components of the English national curriculum. British schools delivering the English national curriculum may sound a little bit odd to some people, because those of you who are aware of the nature of the United Kingdom will recognise it is made up of England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. And Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland have autonomy over their own curriculum and have their own model. But in the international sector and in British overseas schools, it is almost always the case that the English national curriculum is the one which is adopted and delivered. Similarly, with American overseas schools, one is almost certainly going to see an adoption of American standards-based curriculum models, often focused around Common Core or Arrow standards, Arrow being American Education Reaches Out, which is mapped against Common Core. Now, as I've said, Common Core only applies to mathematics and English language. However, many such schools will also use NGSS, New Generation Science Standards, when framing their science programs. But because there's no statutory requirement and each state has their own different way of implementing curriculum, there is no wholesale American approach. So schools can use their own bespoke methodology, and if the children return to their country of origin, i.e. the United States, then they should be hopefully able to seamlessly adopt to the program in the state that they return to. Having said that about the focus of English education in British schools and American education in American schools, it's also true to say that many of these schools will adopt the IBDP program instead of A-levels as their pre-university course. Instead of A-levels, but also instead of AP, which is the American equivalent, one might say. International schools without affiliation to any third-party nation have more freedom in adopting a curriculum model which they might frame their wider curriculum around. Many such schools uncritically adopt Cambridge International or IB programs as their frameworks, where others may draw upon one of these models while developing bespoke models to reflect their guiding statements and sense of identity. I have a problem sometimes with schools which almost blindly market themselves as being Cambridge schools or IB schools. To be that closely associated with your examination body that you would consider it part of your identity as a school, to me undermines how much emphasis you place upon your own guiding statements, your own mission and your own vision. Of course, the IB will have their own mission and vision, as will Cambridge, but that isn't necessarily the vision of your school. So it is worth using those programs, but using them in the context of your own setting. Now, of course, this is only when schools have the autonomy to adopt these programs, and this will depend upon statutory requirements. In some countries, statutory requirements may apply up to the age of 14 or 16, which does give schools more independence and autonomy at the post-16 or, in some cases, post-14 sectors. How should we go about implementing curriculum, and how should it be reviewed and designed? Some key questions should include: when should assessment be developed? How should assessment inform planning? A popular planning model, which I will admit I like a lot, is that of backward design, which is quite common in international schools. It's actually been developed by two American writers, Grant Wiggins and Jay McTighe, as part of their work on understanding and design. But it's not just a philosophy which is used in American international schools. Its philosophy has been adopted across schools with other identities as well. In a nutshell, backward design advocates that curriculum is developed with assessment being the starting point. Thus, a team of curriculum planners will write assessments as the first stage in designing their curriculum model. Starting with the end in mind is an eminently sensible method of designing curriculum, and of course one that any teacher of examination courses will recognise. The idea that teachers can teach a unit of study and then subsequently write an assessment is perverse. The idea that you teach from a textbook and then decide to test the students is absolutely ridiculous. You need to have the end in mind. You need to know what the outcomes of your program are before you start teaching it. So look, what do you want the students to know, understand? What skills and attitudes do you want them to develop? That's what you want to assess. So you write the assessment very much in the same way that an examination body will write A-level, IGCSE, AP exams in advance in conjunction with developing their syllabus models. The question as to whether assessment should drive curriculum matters or curriculum should be driving assessment is a tricky question, I will accept. But it's true to say that curriculum should always drive assessment, as the curriculum is more than just the assessed program of study. The curriculum is the total educational experience that students have, and thus assessments are only one aspect of a bigger picture. In the context of designing a program of study, one can make the argument that assessment should drive unit planning, as otherwise the cart is before the horse. Now, it's worth seriously considering that point. And again, it comes back to how you define the term curriculum. If you accept my definition that it applies to the wider dimension of all learning experiences, then of course you don't write the assessment first. But when developing the unit of study, the program of study, it makes eminent sense to know what you're working towards. So depending on how you define curriculum may determine how you go about structuring your assessments. The late Grant Wiggins and Jay McTighe also placed great emphasis on the concept of transfer, again, in their work on understanding and design. It's actually true that in the concept of their work on understanding and design, they perhaps make more of their philosophy of transfer than they actually do of backward design. Backward design tends to be what they're more associated with, but transfer is such an important part of their work. Transfer is based around the idea that knowledge and concepts and skills are transferable between different subject domains. In order to make this more straightforward, one can use curriculum mapping tools, perhaps the most famous of these being Atlas from Rubicon. Then schools can design their curriculum maps around making transfer more straightforward for curriculum planners. So if you've ever used Atlas, you'll know that as a series of drop-down boxes, you can link the standards of your own educational program to each subject area. So it's quite plausible to have a standard which is applicable in social studies, which is also applicable in science, and both subject areas can be achieving this standard. Then, if the school is divided into subject areas in departments, the department members can actually cross-reference where the standards are being delivered. Now, it makes eminent sense if you want to develop cross-curricular projects and cross-curricular work for your students. It's fair to say that in the PYP, MYP, and IBDP, the concept of transfer is built into the curriculum models already. Curriculum designers using the English National Curriculum, for example, will probably have to work much harder in many respects to build in opportunities for transfer. as English National Curriculum subjects exist in silos. The actual English National Curriculum documentation is designed around subjects very much as separate entities, rather than looking at ways they can be blended together. Creative planning can overcome difficulties in primary and middle school, but it becomes increasingly difficult at IGCSE and A-level, where subject specialism is of central importance, and opportunities for transfer are by their very nature less likely. There is no set definition of creative curriculum. Creative curriculum models are normally most appropriate in primary schools and middle schools. It's less likely that you'll find them in high school because of the focus upon examination courses where subjects by their very nature are siloed. Creative curriculum can be structured in different ways, and it would possibly depend upon the mission and vision of the school as to whether they adopt topic-based learning, theme-based curriculum models, or committee-led curriculum structures. And they may also adopt a hybrid of those three models in the way that they structure their curriculum. What creative curriculum does is place a great emphasis on developing skills and attitudes rather than be rooted in knowledge and content. I accept that that is quite a controversial approach to education, and many more traditional teachers would reject it and say that the emphasis on knowledge is underestimated. Now, it's not a debate that I particularly want to get into in this context. So I'll just say that the skills which creative curriculums try to develop will include things like cooperation between students, developing communication skills, organisation skills, the student's ability to present individually or as a group, working together as a team, problem solving, and investigation and discovery. All very credible skills. Now, whether they should be separated from knowledge is, as I say, debatable. Part of my argument, which I will hopefully consistently present, is that curriculum encompasses the big picture of all the learning experiences which take place in an international school. So when I worked at Marymount as curriculum director, I developed a document which is just a screenshot of the big picture of the curriculum model that was utilised particularly in our school in Paris. The model of the curriculum shows that curriculum subjects fall into the category of how do we organise learning. Now, this was deliberate because I and my colleagues wanted to highlight the fact that learning subjects in classrooms is only one aspect of a genuinely holistic approach to learning, and that all learning should be focused upon meeting the guiding statements, which you can see are at the top of the big picture framework. In the case of the guiding statements, in the Marymount case, they were framed as the goals and criteria, and they were a set of statements which were applicable across all of the schools within the network. As you move down the document, it becomes more spoke to represent the needs and the setting of the school in Paris. So there's an aspect of commonality, but there's also an aspect of independence for a school working within a network or foundation. Now, being a Catholic school, in the context of Marymount, the religious and spiritual dimension of the school was at the heart of the curriculum. So this philosophical approach to curriculum stressed that the mission and values of the school must be at the centre of all aspects of learning. That is the why dimension. The very purpose of the school is to develop students to be more deeply religious and to develop in their spirituality. Of course, this is very specific to the nature and purpose of an individual school or group of schools. And what is at the heart of the identity of one school may be of peripheral or no importance in another. Parents usually choose a school, though, for their children based upon the mission and vision. And as such, a school has a duty to live out the values that it purports to do. If the guiding statements, as I've said before, are no more than a framed set of words in a school foyer, then the school is failing to meet this mission. Parents choose a school based upon its identity, its mission, and its values, often more so than the curriculum model they adopt. Now, it may be that if they are British and are on a short-term contract, or similarly American, and they're in a country for a few years, the local British or American school may be the most appropriate. But if they're going to be in a country for a longer period of time, it's likely that they'll look at what values underpin the school. So that's why many people, if they are religious, if they're believers in a faith, are more likely to choose a faith school. If they believe in holistic, progressive education, they're more likely to choose a PYP, MYP school. And if they're more traditional in their approach to education, they may opt for a school which adopts a more traditional curriculum methodology. When designing and developing curriculum, it's essential that teachers work together. Professor John Hutty identifies collective teacher efficacy as a key component in impacting upon student learning. It's one of his top 10 factors. It is thus vital that teachers meet regularly within departments, across departments, at grade level and across grade level to discuss curriculum matters, and subsequently review and develop curriculum to ensure salient scope and sequence. A highly effective school will build such planning into a teacher's schedule, as collective planning is at the heart of curriculum development. In such meetings, teachers ensure they are not distracted by issues such as logistics, behaviour, or other school events. These issues can be discussed in a separate forum and should not distract teachers from their core responsibility of ensuring that learning is meaningful and impactful. Scope and sequence is a crucial dimension in curriculum planning and development. The scope refers to the area of development addressed by the curriculum. The sequence includes plans and materials for learning experiences to support and extend the children's learning at various levels of development. An organised development scope and sequence outlines what the curriculum focuses on and how the plans and materials support the learners at different stages of development, usually across different grade levels or year groups. So thus, an organised developmental scope and sequence helps education staff support children's development of skills, behaviours and knowledge, includes examples of materials, teaching practices and learning experiences that support the students at different levels of development, allows flexibility to respond to the needs of individual learners, including dual language learners and children with disabilities and other special needs, and provides information to teachers that help them to plan and communicate with families and other education partners. So scope and sequence makes sure that the curriculum is coherent. To give an example of what it can be like if scope and sequence is adhered to, is when you go to a school and you find that in grade 4 or year 4, there's a focus upon Roman history. Similarly, because the teacher likes Roman history in grade 6, they again repeat a unit on the Romans. And when they move into middle school, the social studies history teacher maybe doesn't even realise that they've already studied the Romans twice. And again, they study the Romans. Now, there are many ancient civilizations that can be studied in order to create a spiral curriculum to stress the kind of generic aspects of the ancient world without necessarily studying the Romans each time. For example, the Egyptians. For example, the ancient Mesopotamians, Babylonians, Carthaginians, Greeks, and so on. And when looking at history programs, it's also essential to take into account the host country or region and not to make it too Eurocentric if you are teaching in the Far East or Sub-Saharan Africa. When developing curriculum and looking at the design principles and practices, 21st century learning is something which often gets mentioned. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of the term 21st century learning, although its components I have no problem with and see as an essential aspect of curriculum development. I prefer to talk of making use of the tools of the modern era. The 21st century began 20 years ago. We're a fifth of the way through it, and the tools of technology and what we may consider to be 21st century learning is evolving all the time. At some stage, we need to step away from that term. Since creating the presentation for the ELSA conference in 2013, I would subsequently add eco-literacies to the list that I made. A curriculum for the modern age must focus on the topic which is overwhelmingly the most important issue facing the modern world. In the early years, children should be given ample opportunities to play and experience the world around them. They will only learn to care about their environment if they learn to love it first. Environmental education programs should then be developed in an age-appropriate manner. One can only be globally literate if one understands the greatest crisis facing humanity. In the modern era, there are countless technological and digital tools that enhance learning, and students be given the opportunity to use such tools in their classrooms and beyond. However, today's tools will not be the tools of tomorrow, so in promoting digital literacy, a school should concentrate on generic and transferable skills rather than teaching children how to use a particular tool. I'm making this presentation using a map book. How many more years will a map book be a relevant tool? Social media is another tool that should not be overlooked as a learning device. It is part of modern life, whether we like it or not. The world is now a much smaller place, and humanity is interconnected by social media. Rather than fight against the inevitable, it is eminently sensible for schools to utilize these tools to enhance the learning experience. Children should also be taught the dangers of social media and taught how to be responsible digital citizens. In that way, they can be aware of the dangers of bullying and exploitation that may happen online. To ignore the existence of social media is to do a disservice to our young people. An international school has a duty to embrace and promote the host country, and this should go beyond respecting statutory requirements where applicable. An international school fails in its mission if it's an enclave of a foreign system without recognizing and celebrating the country where it is hosted. It is not enough to celebrate the host country through events, and there is more to promoting the host nation than the 5 Fs of flags, festivals, food, fashion, and faces, or famous faces. Programs of study should be designed in such a way that the study of the host country is embedded into the curriculum. I've written about this in another article which can be found on my website, and it's called The Importance of the Host Country for an International School. Similarly, an international school has a similar duty to promote the mother tongue of its students. UNESCO has done a lot of outstanding work in this area. Embracing the mother tongue extends beyond promoting the language of the host country and should give all students an opportunity to develop their own language, their home language. This is a far from easy task, and one which involves working with outside agencies, perhaps agencies and other cultural organisations, and it is often beyond the scope of the staff employed directly by the school. So this is where liaison with the wider community is very important. This is not an area of my own particular expertise, but it is something which must be done within an international school. According to the International Baccalaureate, an internationally minded person is open-minded about the common humanity of all people and accepts and respects other cultures and beliefs. The internationally minded person takes action through discussion and collaboration to help build a better and more peaceful world. The IB has published an interesting blog post that you may be able to visit, which is entitled 10 Ways to Promote International Mindedness, and it gives advice on how to embed this philosophy into the curriculum. Although it's written for IB schools, the ideas are easily adapted for other settings. According to UNESCO, global citizenship education aims to empower learners of all ages to assume active roles, both locally and globally. in building more peaceful, tolerant, inclusive and secure societies. It is based upon 3 domains of learning: the cognitive, social and emotional, and behavioural. So in promoting global citizenship, we should focus on the cognitive, developing knowledge and thinking skills necessary to better understand the world and its complexities. There should be a focus on the socio-emotional aspects of learning, the values, attitudes and social skills that enable learners to develop effectively, psychologically and physically, and enable them to live together with mutual respect and in peace. And a focus upon the behavioural, the conduct, performance and practical application and engagements of living in a global society. There are wonderful ideas for promoting international mindedness and global citizenship that can be found through the British Council's website, Connecting Classrooms. The website includes lesson plans and resources that can be embedded into a school's curriculum. Social emotional learning should be something which is embedded into the curriculum as well. It's not something that necessarily has to be taught explicitly, but can be part of a discrete curriculum. There are different ways of doing it, but it should be a key component of a holistic curriculum. There's an article which can be found on Edutopia, Why Social and Emotional Learning is Essential for Students, and that focuses in greater depth on the importance of social and emotional learning. It isn't just the job of the life skills or PSHE teacher, it is the job of everybody in a school community to promote social and emotional learning, so our children are happy and able to flourish. Now, there are some who may question so-called soft skills, but what I would say to them is students are much more likely to be successful in all aspects of life if they are happy and feel safe, and that includes academic success. So even if your reasons are to promote academic success as your raison d'etre of the life of a school and the purpose of a school, it is wise to promote social and emotional learning. To me, you should promote social and emotional learning because children are all unique individuals, each worthy of respect, and their own development should be of serious consideration. The language of instruction is something else which is worth considering in an international school. And again, it's a reflection of the educational priorities of the school and how a school sees its position in the international sector. Many international schools will deliver their academic programs through the medium of English, and high school students will often sit examinations in English. This is the case in IB schools, Cambridge schools, and schools which use American standard-based curriculum models. Whilst it is rare to find schools that are multilingual, there are significant numbers of schools in the international sector that deliver the curriculum in a bilingual fashion. This is especially the case in the primary and middle school phases. The bilingual model is more commonly the norm in countries where the mother tongue of the host country is a language that is widely spoken globally. Thus, many schools in the French or Spanish-speaking world may teach in English and the mother tongue. Similarly, many bilingual schools in China and other parts of Asia will offer bilingual instruction. Again, it is well worth visiting UNESCO, and in this case their learning portal, for a much more in-depth analysis of the importance of language in education. Something which is often overlooked when looking at curriculum principles and practices and development in the world of international education is the importance of scheduling. It may seem often that's just something which is done by the timetabling person and is handed out to teachers, and it's almost ad hoc with no thought behind it. But that is not the case. Scheduling is an important dimension when considering how the curriculum is delivered in an international school. The school timetable is an expression of the school's priorities. This is most obvious when one considers the scheduling of course subjects like English and mathematics. These subjects are often allocated more curriculum time, which indicates the importance attached to them by the school. Conversely, one can see how important PE is, or the arts, by the amount of curriculum time given to those subjects. In some schools, it can be considerable, and they can have the same status as the core subjects, but in other schools, they are often on the peripheral. How the students are grouped is another indication of priorities of the school. Are students grouped by ability, by age or ability in the language of instruction? Are subjects taught within departments, faculties, or as part of a thematic approach? The organisation of the curriculum may seem like a logistical matter, but this is rarely the case, as scheduling reflects upon the values of the school. As I keep emphasising, the curriculum extends beyond what is taught by subject teachers in the classroom. Many schools will operate an extended school model, where the curriculum is enriched by activities that take place before or after school, and sometimes during break and lunch times. The nature of these extracurricular activities indicates the priorities for the school. Are students given the opportunity to play sports and games, or is the focus on providing extra time for academic programs? Do students have the additional time to work upon art projects or to practice a musical instrument, or are they compelled to attend additional classes in English or maths? Of course, it isn't necessarily one thing or the other. An extracurricular provision may be highly individualised or may differ according to the phase of education. The allocation of resources is also an expression of the school's values. Like scheduling, it's a real indication of what the school prioritises. Are the arts well funded and resourced? Are laboratories well resourced? Does the school have adequate facilities for PE? How school leaders manage the budget for resources is a clear indication of what they value most. Homework is an extension of learning that takes place outside of the classroom. The nature of homework may differ depending upon whether the school is a day school or a boarding school. It is interesting that despite Hattie's research findings that homework has a negligible impact on student learning in the primary sector, most international schools set their students substantial amounts of homework. Does this beg the question as to whether schools set homework more due to parental expectations or more because of the educational value of doing so? It is also worth noting that until high school, students rarely have the ability to carry out effective research projects, but teachers often set this type of work for homework. Hattie's research suggests that the most effective homework in the middle school phase is that which reinforces learning or reviews work carried out in class. Positive relationships between schools and parents are of paramount importance for effective education. Parents and schools share a common purpose and should be united in their aims. In terms of curriculum, there is great value in keeping parents abreast of developments. Parents are far more likely to be supportive of their child's school if they feel valued and are treated as more than just passive partners in the educational process. Schools should articulate their curricular principles and practices to parents by producing salient documentation that is written in clear and accessible language, particularly in the case where the parents may not read effectively in the language of instruction or the language which is commonly used in the school. Moreover, schools should offer regular parent information sessions which are structured in a manner that allow parents to ask questions about curriculum matters. These should also contain an element of question and answer. That way, parents are able to ask of the school what they really want to know, rather than sit through a staged, managed presentation. Of course, there is room for both. School leaders have a duty to ensure the effective delivery of the curriculum. In monitoring teaching and learning, school leaders should focus more on supporting teachers, though, in their delivery of the curriculum, and less upon accountability measures. This isn't to say that teachers should not be held accountable for the quality of their teaching, but more to say that leaders should work with teachers to ensure the quality of education. Thus, lesson observation should be focused upon providing teachers with meaningful feedback that might improve the quality of teaching and learning. Book trawls should be used to check on the quality of curriculum revision. Displays should exemplify the quality of learning. Interviews with students should focus on mentoring and supporting students in their learning rather than as a mechanism for checking up on the teachers. Performance management procedures should be framed in the context of coaching. Curriculum maps should be viewed to assess the opportunities for transfer and to ensure the quality of scope and sequence. And teacher planners should be viewed to ensure consistency within and across academic departments. Please leave your thoughts on the comments in the comment box below. I'm happy to discuss or debate any aspects of this article. If you feel that you have gained anything from watching this video, please like the video and subscribe to our channel by clicking on the subscribe button at the bottom. In subscribing, you won't be spammed through email, but you will receive a notification on your YouTube channel. Thank you so much for listening, and I do hope that you may have learned something.